How do you feel about the jury?
I feel good about the jury. Yeah, we selected them. I was there. I took part in it, and we chose fair and truthful, civic-minded citizens of Norfolk County. So I feel good.
All eyes on Dedham, Massachusetts this morning. The fate of defendant Karen Reed will be in the hands of a jury later today, but not before the all-important closing arguments. As we count down to closings, we're asking, what will they look like? Will the defense point the finger at someone else like Brian Higgins? And why did we not hear from former trooper Michael Proctor this time around? We're breaking down the defense's last-minute decision to withdraw a missing witness instruction. Plus, we are live from the buffer zone, how the people outside the courthouse can affect Karen Reed's case. It's all next, right here on Opening Statements. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julia Janae, filling in for Julie Grant, and what a program we have for you today. Just like in an actual trial in a courtroom, we are getting you ready for what's ahead inside of the courtroom and our trial coverage today. So first, let's take a look at what's on deck on our daily docket.
Why were you afraid of her?
I was afraid of her because I watched her kill the father of her kid. And a friend did the same thing to me.
In South Carolina, the state's case is expected to wrap up today in the coroner affair murder trial for defendant Megan Jackson. That testimony resumes at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And in New York City, Sean Diddy Combs' personal assistant is expected to take the stand in the music mogul's federal sex trafficking trial happening there. Court starts at 9 a.m. Eastern. And in Florida, defendant Donna Adelson has had a change of venue request put in, and that hearing is happening today at 9 a.m. Eastern. She wants to move her upcoming trial out of town, out of Tallahassee. We'll keep you updated on all of those. But for now, let's turn our attention to the huge day that's happening in Dedham, Massachusetts. That's where we begin this hour. We are just moments away from closing arguments in Karen Reed's murder retrial. And we have a live look for you outside of the Dedham courthouse. Attorneys are expected to report in about half an hour. You see those crowds, that sea of pink there, all of those supporters in this expanded buffer zone after initially being pushed very far away from the courthouse. And we know inside of the courtroom, those attorneys are going to be facing off. Hank Brennan and Alan Jackson delivering their closing argument to this jury. Now, a ruling was made Thursday at a charge conference hearing that the attorneys cannot bring up a third-party culprit in their closings, in part.
That I would give you the opportunity to try and develop testimony regarding Brian Higgins and Brian Albert as third-party culprits. That threshold that you need to make to do that, to argue them as three-party culprits, has not been made by the defense. So you cannot argue that either Brian Higgins or Brian Albert committed or had the motive and all of that. Not third-party culprit, pure third-party culprit. You can get into third-party culprit with Brian Higgins, that the police were aware of whatever you're going to argue and failed to act on it. But it's strictly for that purpose.
So the defense, you heard there from Judge Cannoni, they can argue about in defense, which will focus on the alleged faulty police investigation. And remember, the defense claims that the police didn't look into ATF agent Brian Higgins, and they claim he was involved in Boston police officer John O'Keefe's death. Higgins testified in the first trial, but not this one.
You also took your phone, now without the SIM card, and you put that in the trash bag too, did you not?
Yes, sir.
Then you drove to a military base and you threw both the destroyed SIM card and the phone into a dumpster, did you not?
Well, I was cutting through the base, and I believe how I testified
was... Did you drive to a military base, sir?
I was cutting through a base, yes.
Did you drive to it?
Yes, sir.
And then you put both the destroyed SIM card and the phone itself, which were in a trash bag, into a dumpster on that military base, did you not?
I believe that's what I did, yes.
So with the judge's ruling, the defense can't argue directly that someone else committed the crime, but they can argue that there's inadequate evidence, or that there's evidence that there was an inadequate police investigation, a failure on the part of police in not talking about Brian Higgins. But we want to break down, how does the defense get Brian Higgins into their closing argument? Here to discuss, we have a great panel this morning. Criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr. and Joe Tamburino with us, both great criminal defense attorneys. And we also have forensic pathologist Dr. Jan Gorniak with us as well. So good to have you all on to talk about this case as we get ready for these closing arguments. Joseph Krowski Jr., I want to start with you. Talk us through this difference between a bound defense and a third-party culprit defense that we know that a defense in this case really wanted to get in all along.
So in Massachusetts, it's really nuanced. If there is a substantial basis that someone else may be the perpetrator of the crime, the defense can argue third-party culprit, that someone else is responsible. Now, they don't have a burden of proof, but if they make that threshold showing of substantial basis, certainly it's something that the prosecution then has to address, and the jury can consider it in the overall calculus of reasonable doubt. What the Judge Cannone found in this case is they didn't meet that minimum threshold. Essentially, there was no evidence that anyone else committed the crime. What is a lesser showing that's required is a bound defense. If the police have some information, and it doesn't have to be a substantial basis, that someone else may have been responsible, or someone else is at least worthy of investigation, then the jury can assess whether or not the police fully and robustly investigated the case. And if there were shortcomings in the investigation, in this case, by not further investigating Higgins, then the jury can consider that in the overall calculus of reasonable doubt. It's a little difficult in this case because they didn't, what the clip you just showed was the Higgins testimony from the first trial. So all they have regarding Higgins is some of those flirtatious texts back and forth between him and Karen Reed, where Karen Reed was actually the one that sought out his attention.
Joe Tamburino, what do you think? How do you think it's going to play out in these closing arguments? Because we've talked offline about the third-party culprit claim that came out in the opening statements, but you believe that there's some promises they made in openings that we're not going to get to in closings.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things as a defense attorney is when you give an opening statement, and we all know that opening statements aren't evidence. Yes, that's all true, but juries still listen to them and people pay attention to them. You have to be careful of what you promise. And the defense in the Reed case promised a lot. I mean, they promised things like they're going to explain that there was no collision. I don't think that went anywhere. They're going to explain that Mr. O'Keefe died in the house. Really not much evidence of that. And they're also going to explain how other people did this. Could have been Higgins, could have been anybody else, whoever it was, third-party culprit. And as your last guest just said, and Massachusetts law is similar to other laws throughout the nation, including Minnesota, the defense has basically what's called a burden of production. You have to give some evidence that somebody else did this crime. Well, they didn't even meet that, not even that burden of production. So I think a lot of promises that the defense had in openings is really going to come back to haunt them in closings.
So much that we're anticipating, and I'm so happy that we have in our arsenal today on the panel, we have Dr. Jan Gorniak, who has served in medical examiner roles across the country, former chief medical examiner in Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia, Columbus, Ohio, and D.C. Dr. Gorniak, what is your take on this case? I know you've been following it closely, and really what it's going to come down to when we're talking about this third-party culprit theory is whether or not this was the result of a beating plus dog bite, or if this was a collision with a car. What is your take?
So, good morning, Julia. Thank you for having me. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on in this case. I don't believe he was hit by the car, especially intentionally hit by the car. So we'll take both sides. So the defense thinks that maybe he was beat up in the house. He doesn't have that many injuries or fell down basement steps. He has one laceration to the back of his head and then those superficial abrasions or scratches on his arm. That would not result from him being beat up or being, thrown down the stairs or falling down the stairs. And then the vehicle was allegedly going 24 miles an hour in reverse. To get hit by a car at that speed, you would definitely have more injuries. All he has, once again, is that laceration to the back of his head, which is one blunt force, which probably came from him falling backwards. I want to talk about the broken taillight. We're speculating, the accident reconstructionists are speculating that, oh my goodness, my lights went off again in my office. I'm sorry about that. That he got the scratches on his arm from the taillight. Have you ever walked past a desk or a table and bumped your leg and said, oh my gosh, that's going to leave a bruise? Well, if you get hit by a vehicle going 24 miles an hour, that's going to leave a bruise. He has no bruises on his body. Plus the reenactment with the paint and the scratches, that was done with the taillight already broken. So those scratches would have come from a taillight that was already broken. So you have to have the initial impact. So those scratches did not come from the broken taillight, plus he did not have extensive trauma to that arm. So I don't believe either side's opinions about how he received those injuries and died.
And there's definitely a body of people who do believe that neither side has it right in terms of the injuries. Before we go to break, Joseph Krasky Jr., real quick, are we going to hear about Brian Albert? Can they get into anyone else? And why can't they get into anyone else in terms of who they might be pointing the finger at?
I don't think so. I think the defense streamlined away from the third-party culprit defense. They didn't call Brian Albert. I think they'll lose credibility with the jury. I agree with Joe. They promised too much in the opening that they didn't deliver. So if I was them, I'd stay away from Brian Albert altogether. Maybe just the simple fact that he didn't come out of the house at 6:20 a.m.
So much ahead in this case. Everyone stand by. We do have to slip in a break, but still to come here on Opening Statements.
Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
We all remember this man, former Trooper Proctor, missing from Reed's retrial. We saw him the first time around, not here for the second trial. And we'll talk about the defense's withdrawn motion about missing witnesses. Plus, a live look in Massachusetts as we head to the buffer zone. We will get a report from out there in front of the courthouse ahead of these closing arguments.
Karen Reed is in the midst of the retrial of the century.
She is factually innocent. She's guilty.
There's something wrong in this county.
Come at me.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
The brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Detectives arrested Brian Kohlberger.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College student murders trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
Here we go. This is a live look at what's happening right now outside of that Norfolk County Superior Courthouse, where in just moments we expect these jurors to be returning to the courthouse, the parties to return to the courthouse to begin closing arguments, and eventually today deliberations. You see, there's a lot of people. It looks like more than we've seen outside the courthouse throughout this trial. That buffer zone is moved various points during the trial, but today we are seeing a lot of people. We're seeing hugs. Looks like people who are friends who missed each other. Maybe they've been here for the first trial and now the second trial. We'll get a live report from on the ground there in just a moment. But many are wondering about something that happened yesterday inside of that courthouse when the defense withdrew the missing witness jury instruction that they initially asked for. And this happened again on Thursday. They would have been asking for the jury to be instructed on the missing witnesses this trial: Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Michael Proctor, and potentially others, saying that the jurors, this will be the instruction, that the jurors can infer that these missing witnesses possibly would have given unfavorable testimony for the prosecution. But all of a sudden, this happened during that charge conference.
So we'll start with the defendant's missing witness. request. Who's arguing that motion?
We're not arguing that, Your Honor. And I apologize, but we made the decision last night to withdraw 2 of our requested instructions, which would shorten things today, I think.
Oh, okay, so everything on this is done, right? The defendant's motion to present a missing witness argument and request for instruction, you're withdrawing that?
With regard to the absent witness instruction, we're withdrawing that request.
Okay.
There you have it. That was David Yannetti making that comment to the court. And you may remember, we heard former Trooper Proctor testify in the first trial only.
So these came from me. From all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job.
Objection.
So don't spell it. You have to, so these are your words, Trooper Proctor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead and say them.
Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Now, those texts did get read into the evidence through another investigator and a friend of Michael Proctor, but we didn't see him. So what we're asking is, how might not hearing from Proctor this time around tip the scales in this case? Let's bring back in our panel. We have attorney Joe Krowski Jr. and David Bruno is joining us, trial attorney David Bruno, and we still have with us forensic pathologist Dr. Jan Gorniak. Joseph, let me start with you. You've got the Massachusetts expertise here. Talk about the reasoning, or perhaps just what happened there with the absent witness instruction being withdrawn by the defense.
It seems like they've made a strategic choice over the last couple of days based on expert testimony, and they're going to focus on whether or not that car could have been the mechanism of injury. I'm not a doctor, but I respectfully disagree with the doctor you have on today when you consider the tech stream data that car backed up 60 feet at the same time John O'Keefe stopped moving and had pieces of the taillight embedded into his clothing. Here's the problem, sticking with the theme about promising too much in the opening. Trooper Proctor was referred to as a malignancy, a cancer that touched everything in this trial. So I think when you come out that strong and hard, the jury expects to hear something about Proctor. Sure, they heard the mean text, but they certainly fell flat as compared to last trial because they were read into the record by a different witness. Also, a lot of this evidence was obtained and marshaled into the prosecution before Trooper Proctor had even been assigned to the case that day. So I think it's a strategic choice. It's probably a smart choice because the evidence just wasn't there as it relates to Higgins, Albert, and Proctor.
David Bruno, they were mentioned in the openings. There were comments from Alan Jackson in the opening that you will learn that Michael Proctor pre-selected Karen Reed. You will understand that Brian Albert got rid of his home, got rid of his dog. Now they're going to be missing. Is it that they are going to hope that the jurors have common sense, that they're not missing and don't need that instruction? Or what do you think might be their reason for not having that instruction?
I'll tell you, I think this is a massive mistake by the defense, because when we have these charging conferences, you're making a record. It sounds like they maybe thought they were going to lose given the prior segment's conversation on the restriction on third-party culprit guilt. But with that being said, oftentimes, even if we're going to lose these arguments, you're making a record for appeal. And I don't think that they're going to shift away from their closing arguments. They're still going to make certain arguments. They're able to attack the investigation based on third-party guilt. It's almost like a hybrid on it. They can't actually point to Higgins. They can't point to Albert, but they can attack the investigation that they didn't investigate those things. So with that being said, as attorneys in that charging conference, if you think you're going to lose a particular argument, that doesn't mean you just withdraw it. You still make the record. So if she's convicted, you could make the third-party culprit argument on appeal, as well as the charge not being given at the charge final instruction.
Oh, good point, David. Really good point. I do want to shift our attention a bit to someone else we didn't see inside the courtroom, but of course the defense wouldn't call her an absent witness, and that's Karen Reed. She did not testify this time around. It's her right not to testify. The jurors can't hold it against her, but they heard a lot from her. And Dr. Gorniak, I want to play this clip from you. I'm glad we have your medical expertise on the show today because I want to get an answer to something some of our viewers have been asking about. Let's take a listen back to this documentary that Karen Reed spoke to, and she made a comment about her interaction with John's body.
So John's laying there, his left and his right, and I approached John from the left. That's where the street is. And he had a piece of glass, like perched on his nose, like just wedged like a splinter would be. And I just pulled it, and as soon as I pulled it, it just gushed blood down his face.
Dr. Gorniak, people have been wondering if he's there in the cold, would he have blood gushing out? Does that mean his heart is still pumping? Because the defense forensic pathologist claimed that he would have died 15 to 20 minutes into whatever incident happened to him and likely would not have still been alive in that sense. What is your thought on that particular comment by Karen Reed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't believe it was gushing. So when you picture pulling a piece of glass out, it's gushing blood. I don't believe that's what happened. It might have been trickling. You have to remember that your vessels are like tubes, like a hose, and there's blood in the hose. Just because you turn the water off doesn't mean the water disappears. That's the same thing with our blood vessels. Just because the heart stops pumping doesn't mean there's still not blood sitting in the vessels. So if you unplug that vessel with this little piece of glass, that blood that was still in the capillaries or artery, it's still gonna bleed out. Gushing, no. Trickling, yes.
Dr. Gorniak, I want to just let our viewers know that we are seeing here live Karen Reed arriving at the courthouse, sharing hugs with the people that are there, smiles, and heading up, doing the I love you sign, it looks like perhaps, or a wave to all of those supporters that are there for her. You can usually tell by the pink that they are wearing that they are there supporting Karen Reed. Dr. Gorniak, while we watch this, and I know we have to let you go this segment, but final words, what are you going to be looking forward to the most in these closing arguments?
What I'm going to be looking forward to is hearing how they bring in, both sides, bring in how she hit him with the car. The medical examiner who did the autopsy said there was no evidence of him being hit by the car. The defense medical expert, no, didn't hit by the car. So I'm just going to see how both sides play that and get around the lack of injuries from a motor vehicle going 24 miles an hour backwards.
We are all going to be watching together. Dr. Gorniak and Joseph Krowski Jr., thank you so much for being on. David Bruno is staying with us. We do have to slip in a break, but coming up on opening statements, rather. The people outside Karen Reed's courthouse waiting for these closing arguments. Then versus now. Will that affect the jury deliberations at all? We are live from the buffer zone this morning as we count down to those closings.
We're right here today, Jim McDermott, and we're not going to be quiet. We're here. We got it.
That was the scene last year outside of the courthouse where Karen Reed is being tried for the murder of her boyfriend. That was in 2024. The victim here is Boston police officer John O'Keefe. And you saw there the picket signs, the bullhorns, and the chanting galore. A little different this year, not right up on the courthouse steps like we saw last year. There they are, there are barricades this time around. Still seeing a lot of American flags. Now, everyone is getting ready inside of this courtroom to gather for the closing arguments. That's what we are standing by for. We saw Karen Reed arrive moments ago. We know those attorneys are going to be convening. The jurors were supposed to arrive around 8:45. That's 15 minutes from now. Now, in 2024, as I mentioned, Judge Cannoni, she set a 200-foot buffer zone around the courthouse to prevent any kind of juror intimidation. And she tried to expand it for Reed's second trial, but then some protesters sued, and the district judge ruled that the buffer zone could remain, that police had to change how they enforce it. So we're wondering about those enforcements and what's actually happening there on the ground. And we heard during the first trial that jurors could actually hear protesters from inside while they were deliberating. They heard those chants. So we're wondering if there's a danger of that happening again. Let's turn our attention to someone who's a frequent courthouse attendee, creator and host of Road Patrol Live. John DePietro is with us. John, thanks so much for joining us. I know you were there in Dedham. You're inside so that we can hear you, because it can get very loud there in the buffer zone. So thank you for coming inside for us. Tell me about what you are seeing this morning when you arrived there, and how are police enforcing that buffer zone this time around?
Julia, you think you're attending a sporting event, you think you're attending a Patriots game. Keep in mind, it's much better than it was last year. And Massachusetts State Police, they have really gone above and beyond in trying to make this work as efficiently as possible. Last year was a much different story. I actually had PTSD listening to some of the chants of last year, because it's people that are there to be disruptive, to make noise, and the chanting. And, you know, if you really go back, this in the very beginning was really out of hand, where they were catcalling and yelling things at the family, yelling things at the witnesses. It was very intimidating last year. You'd be inside the courtroom, I'd be there. You could hear them outside. You could hear them chanting. This year, it's not as many people as last year, and that's a very good thing. And the state police, listen, they don't want to have an incident. They'd like to not have to arrest anyone. But at the same time, there are people that approach this not in the way you would think people would approach attending a murder trial. And it's more, you know, you'd think you're at a Patriots tailgating event, but between the pink and admittedly, Karen Reed has worked out this system. She tries to, you know, calm them down, but they've cut way down on the horn honking. They've also cut down on the signs and just the basic chanting, because there are other trials going on. There are other people trying to do business. It's also a very busy thoroughfare. You hear a lot of police sirens going through, first responders, fire engines. So at the heart of this, a man's life was lost. You have the family who's greatly impacted. And I've always thought it's wildly inappropriate that these people stand out there. They, you know, take photos of themselves and selfies, and they want to march around and make noise. It really doesn't seem to fit with what you would think for a very solemn murder trial.
Yeah, when we've heard sometimes the booing of the family of John O'Keefe, that's just reprehensible. Yes. We heard some booing of witnesses walking in from last year. So are you saying you're not hearing the chanting as much this time around? And do you think police are going to shut that down if they see it? Definitely, they look like they're further away from the courthouse than they were last year.
That's been a successful move by the judge to do that, because it was. I mean, you could hear it really all over that entire area. So far, I think Massachusetts State Police, again, the troopers, the court officials, the sheriff, the security around there, they've done a good job. They've come this far. They'd like to reach the conclusion. I think they're just fearful that now when it is closing arguments, you do have big crowds coming down. It's a nice day here in the Dedham area, and you don't have any rain. So I think the fear is this afternoon, they want to make sure this doesn't turn into a block party. Listen, no one wants to see this turn into a riot. There's obviously, you know, strong feelings charged on both sides. Obviously, all the demonstrators this time around have been on the Karen Reed side. But what the police want to have happen is let this play out. Any decisions, anything should be happening inside the courtroom. There's no excuse for anyone that tries to disrupt things outside the courtroom. In the very beginning, I used to be out on the steps. Now, because I've spoken out in favor of, I think the prosecution has done a very good job. It becomes increasingly difficult, and in order to be able to do a real broadcast like this.
John, you mentioned something that I did want to ask you about, so thank you for already answering it, on whether or not there were supporters for, and I'll say John O'Keefe's family, but some of the Karen Reed supporters say they are there for justice for John O'Keefe as well, but people who were there to really counter-protest the Karen Reed supporters. We didn't see that until closer to the end of the Karen Reed trial 1. And it sounds like you're saying they're really not out there now. Have you seen those groups out there at all throughout this trial? And what do you think the reason is that we're not seeing the blue shirts as much as we did last year?
I think the reason behind that is because you really don't see as many pink shirts and people. I mean, 1 year ago, I'm not exaggerating, there would be over 500 people there. People would come out all day. They would tailgate. They would, cook out. They'd all be having the trial up on a big screen. And I think some of the supporters of the family felt somebody had to make an effort to counter, offset all of the pink shirts, the Free Karen Reed people. I think because of the diminished crowds, we really haven't started seeing these larger crowds really till just the past couple of days. So as a result, and it's never reached over 100 the way last year, every single day, it just grew larger and larger. I think because of that, the O'Keefe family supporters feel there's no need to really come out because really, what are we talking about? 50 to 100 people. It's not the same as when you had a mob out there.
Great insight, John. I was seeing in that video that we were playing that was from earlier today, it appeared to be Aiden Kearney, a.k.a. Turtle Boy, out there getting video of the crowd, everyone in the background. How much does that play into it when we have the media there, we have a lot of attention on this trial? Is that part of the need to be there? Because it seemed when the buffer zone was much further away that we didn't have this many people. I know it's closing arguments, but once that buffer zone was moved closer, people felt that they perhaps were being heard in a different way.
Yeah, that, and also when it was farther away, the defense team really wasn't kind of playing to the crowd. It's really just been in the last week or so. You've seen people come down. You've seen Robert Alessi. He goes over and greets the supporters. Karen Reed actually, starting just about maybe a week ago, even 2 weeks ago, but she started going across the street and kind of embracing some of the supporters. When people that are watching and following the coverage, when they see that, then that is kind of like their cue that they also want to go down and be part of it. So people that see it, it becomes like a follow the leader. But at the same time, in the very beginning, most of the trial, the defense team has basically kind of ignored the crowd. That's really amped up the past couple of days.
John DePietro, host of Road Patrol Live. We are so thankful to have you on to get this on-the-ground look and insight about everything going on there. I know you'll be watching those closing arguments closely, and we will be talking to you later at some point. Thank you again. Coming up, closing arguments in Karen Reed's retrial. It's just minutes away. There's a look at the fan that's live inside of the courtroom. So our cameras are on, but they are not on the record. So as soon as they go on the record, we will take you live to Dedham.
How do you feel about the jury?
I feel good about the jury. Yeah, we selected them. I was there. I took part in it, and we chose fair and truthful, civic-minded citizens of Norfolk County. So I feel good.
Karen Reed is in the midst of the retrial of the century.
She is factually innocent. She's guilty. There's something wrong in this county.
Come at me.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
The brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Detectives arrested Brian Kohlberger.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College student murders trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
I'm single, I'm single, but I'm dating. I'm just taking my time with life.
All right. So what we is?
We date. We dating. We go have dates. And we friends.
That was Sean Diddy Combs back in 2022 on a podcast called Carisha Please. Carisha Brownlee, a rapper who goes by the name of Young Miami, she and other celebrities have been mentioned during this trial, but haven't appeared inside of the courtroom. And we're wondering, could that change? We are moments away from testimony resuming in Diddy's federal trial. Thursday was the final day of testimony for alleged victim Jane, who spent 6 days on the witness stand. On Wednesday, while on cross, Diddy's defense questioned Jane on discovering this relationship with rapper Young Miami, and she wasn't pleased.
If you look at the create date here on the bottom, does it say February 12th, 2023? Yes, it does. So this is the same day that you find out that he is with Carisha on the island? Yes. And so in this message you say, then when I put the truth in your face, you asked to just be friends and break up, right? Yes. And when you were upset about him and Carisha being in Turks, you put the truth to him and he asked to be friends and break up, right? I was upset about having sex with 3 men. Well, here you're talking about the lie, which was the birthday trip to Turks, right? And having to deal with the aftermath of seeing this for another woman. Yes, it was painful.
All right. We're also hearing about another name inside of that, not necessarily the courtroom, but someone who wants to be inside of the courtroom. CNN is reporting that rapper Kanye West wants to attend Diddy's trial, saying he wants to show support for Combs and that he's been in contact with Combs' family. So we're asking, based on what we heard at the beginning of this trial, especially during jury selection, where are all the other celebrities? And here to discuss, we have a fantastic attorney panel. We have criminal defense attorneys, both former prosecutors, David Bruno and Joe Tamburino, with us. And I know, guys, you have been following this case from the very beginning. And when we first heard about what was going to be happening inside of this courtroom, jury selection, there was this questioning of the jurors as to whether or not they were familiar with Michael B. Jordan, Mike Myers, definitely Cassie Ventura we've seen on the stand, who is a celebrity in her own right. We've heard from Dawn Richard, a former member of Danity Kane. But in terms of A-lister celebrities, we really haven't seen them in the courtroom. David, what's your take on what we're seeing inside of the gallery and on the witness stand?
Yeah, my take is this case is not over. You know, I think the government, don't forget, the government's in their case in chief right now, and they are streamlining this. They are working their case around the Cassie video to show that the monster is possible, because some of these stories that are coming off the witness stand are really not that believable unless you could see this happening on that video. That's number one. Number two, I think the defense is going to have a different strategy here. That's when we may be hearing about more. In fact, just recently, the defense is pushing for the identity of a big name rapper that allegedly was at some sort of incident with Jane where she pulled up her shirt and showed her breasts. And the identification of that particular person has not been released, and the defense is really pushing it. And I think that's a preview to what we're going to see from the defense moving forward, because they really have to show consent, coercion, pressure. It's all required in the sex trafficking allegation. And what we're seeing in the cross and the previews in the opening is that those were consensual relationships. And it may be that we're hearing about more people that observed the relationship that have more celebrity status in the days to come.
We're going to talk more about what may be coming up in the defense case. But first, I do want, Joe, you to listen to this piece of sound. This is an AI-generated reenactment of what happened when Deontay Nash was on cross, because there was a name that was mentioned during jury selection, and we haven't seen Michael B. Jordan on the stand, but here is what Nash testified about the celebrity.
So, Mr. Nash, you hooked her up with Michael B. Jordan, right?
Indeed.
All righty.
She fine. I mean, why not? They were broken up. He was at the Revolt Music Conference with Gina.
Okay.
And I was getting thrust to my phone because Cassie found out.
All right, Joe, we did hear from Kid Cudi, who had very personal testimony about his vehicle being torched and someone being inside of his house, but really haven't heard from anyone else who may have been in Cassie's circle, who may have dated her. Do you think there's still a possibility that we could see someone like actor Michael B. Jordan on the stand?
I think it's unlikely. You know, your original question was, where are all the celebrities? Where are the A-listers? What I can tell you, they're running away from this trial. This trial is kryptonite for an A-lister celebrity. Why would you want to be involved in this? Of course you wouldn't. You know, the Diddy trial, and, yes, he's charged with RICO, this conspiracy, all these different crimes, sex trafficking, drugs, prostitution, everything like that. But when it comes down to it, the government's going to have to prove that he conspired with someone. Who else was involved to help him pull off all these crimes? That's really the Achilles heel of the government's case. However, what we're also hearing about is all of these other very bad, unpleasant acts. So at the end of the day, no, celebrities aren't going to want to touch this case. We might see some in the defense, but they're running away from this, as would I.
Yeah, no celebrities even in the gallery, as you mentioned. No celebrity will want to touch this. Except, of course, if you are Kanye West. We will see if we see him inside of the courtroom as he is claiming he wants to be. Let's turn our attention now, though, to the music mogul's defense. We expect that to start perhaps by the middle of the week next week. So we're getting very close to the end of the government's case. He's been defending himself against these multiple allegations of bad acts that seems like years of time that the prosecution say he was involved in this. And many of us have learned a lot about Diddy's lifestyle way before this trial started. But the lightning rod for this case was sparked by that viral hotel video with Cassie Ventura.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you got to do that.
How did you feel during the freak-offs when Sean beat you?
Worthless, just like dirt, like I didn't matter to him. But that I was nothing, like absolutely nothing.
But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
Cuddy, are you nervous to testify today?
What are you expecting today?
Big week this week. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
Here's who we have seen in the gallery and in the courtroom in support of Diddy. It's members of his family. Here's his mother, Janice Combs. She's been there every single day. His children, including his sons, Justin and Christian, they were seen earlier this week arriving at the courthouse. But we're asking, as we're inching closer to the defense case, who might testify for Diddy? David Bruno, who do you think we are going to have on deck in terms of a case, and how long do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, just in the transcript that we just read with AI, you could see the cross-examination on jealousy. They're trying to show that these women were in consensual relationships and they were showing jealousy when these other women would come into the relationship. So whatever they need to do on that point, because the sex trafficking statute that requires the Commercial Sex Act also requires force, fraud, or coercion. And certainly if somebody is voluntarily in a relationship and not forced, is going to be defense number one on the Commercial Sex Act sex trafficking allegations. And RICO follows suit as well, very similar defenses. So I would think the defense is lining up their witnesses for people that observe these relationships that could show something different than the force coercion that has been led on by the government.
Joe, in terms of a trial that's similar to this one, I was there for the R. Kelly trial in 2021. He had a very short case after a very similar case against him. He called an accountant, a few people that worked for him. It was just 5 people that they called in. Who do you think we're going to see testify for Sean Diddy Combs?
Well, he's got to have people testify from his own enterprise, his own team, who can say, look, everybody knew that if people were partying hard. Everybody knew that, Mr. Combs was not the nicest person, but people still wanted to be around him, and they consented to do all these sex acts. However, the smoking gun in the Combs case is that video. The video where he's beating Ms. Ventura. Why is that the smoking gun? Because in order to get in order for the government to prove that this was not consensual, you have to show some type of force. And boy, that video shows force. So if you've got someone who's literally beating someone in order to get control of them, that is excellent proof that what you're doing is coercive and violent against them to perhaps control them and have them participate in sex acts. But In their case, they're going to have to call people from his own organization to say, look, these were just wild, crazy parties, but everybody was consenting to it.
We will see what happens. We'll keep you updated on what's happening in New York. Joe Tamburino, you're staying with us. David Bruno, thank you for your analysis this hour.